Since February 1977, rock fans have put forth countless ideas on what the lyrics to Eagles' Hotel California are really about, no two interpretations being exactly alike. This historical and mythical aspect of the song's legend couldn't have pleased anyone more than Eagles founder and frontman Glenn Frey, co-writer of the song himself, as he once described the lyrics as having achieved perfect ambiguity. Perhaps even that's an understatement, as theories of the song's meaning have ranged from music industry greed to the all-out condoning of Satan worship, and everything in between. What to believe? Well, fortunately we're not totally in the dark, as Glenn Frey and majority writer and vocalist on the track Don Henley have commented on the song's inspiration and meaning in many interviews. Lyrically, Don Henley once told Rolling Stone, the song deals with traditional or classical themes of conflict, darkness and light, good and evil, youth and age, the spiritual versus the secular. I guess you could say it's a song about loss of innocence. A little more specifics were provided in a later interview when Don said, "It's about the music business," while at another time saying it was our interpretation into the high life in Los Angeles. As the years passed by since its release, Don inflated that meaning, claiming it was more of a symbolic piece about America in general. We'll keep these explanations in mind and revisit them as we dive into the lyrics themselves in a moment. But first we'll look at the thematic ideas which give the song its legendary personality. Before any words were written, the theme of haunting confusion seemed to jump out of the chord structure of the song's original instrumental demo, recorded and written by Don Felder, when Don Henley and Glenn Frey first heard it. And so Glenn suggested the song take the theme of an episode of the Twilight Zone. A lone guy, he would pitch, who was almost hypnotized by the monotony of driving in the desert in a seemingly endless journey. Dead tired, he sees the light of some refuge in the distance and pulls in for the night. This is when he enters a weird world peopled by freaky characters and is quickly spooked by the claustrophobic feeling of being caught in a disturbing web from which he may never escape. Don Henley loved the idea, the two of them viewing it through the lens of The Magus, a novel from 1965 in which the main character finds himself on a small, unfamiliar Greek island, trapped in a real-life psychological game controlled by a master trickster, one where the ability to tell the difference between what's real and what's illusion becomes nearly an impossibility. In this theme, the underlying message of the sparkling facade of decadent Hollywood hiding the evil underbelly it's truly made up of seemed to jump out at Don Henley. And so he began the tale. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. Right off the bat, let's note that 3 senses have been described. The first being touch, as the cool wind blows through the hair of our innocent, naive protagonist. The second being smell, as the scent of the desert colita plants waft through the air. And thirdly, sight, in the form of the shimmering light seen in the distance. This shimmering light, metaphorically representing the majestic glitz and glamour of Hollywood itself, seems to hypnotize our weary traveler. Upon first glance at it, his head suddenly grows heavy and his sight grows dim, and in this trance he is drawn towards it as a means of refuge, not unlike the countless and nameless millions of lost souls who view or have viewed Hollywood as a beacon of aspirational fulfillment, not least of which the members of Eagles themselves. Nobody was from California, Don Felder would explain about the band in a 2008 interview. And if you drive into LA at night, you can just see this glow on the horizon of lights, and the images start running through your head of Hollywood and all the dreams that you have. Don Henley described Hollywood as a mythical place in the minds of himself and his bandmates in the early days. And in the next verse, his protagonist reaches that place of shimmering light and is greeted by his host. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell. And I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say. Now, I'm sure we all know what the voices said, but before we get into that, we'll first dissect what we just heard. Hearing actually being a key aspect to note, as this is yet another sense that has now been mentioned, our 4th of 5. When our narrator is greeted at the door of the shimmering oasis in the desert, by a woman, of course, representing the sirens of La La Land, he hears a mission bell ring, and it makes him wonder if the place is going to be heaven or hell. Now, for those unaware, California has mission bells along its main highway that are used as mile markers, and some of the history behind them, dating back to the days of Spanish colonialism, is quite dark. As the story goes, when the Spanish began to colonize the southern west coast of what is now the United States, they set up small mission churches in the indigenous lands they seized, where they then enslaved the natives they conquered and forced them to live and work in the missions, with no hope of escape. While on the other hand, mission churches themselves in general are seen by many Catholics as literal houses of God. So then, depending on whose perspective you're looking from, they could be heaven or they could be hell. Did Don Henley know this history when he wrote this line? Well, it's unknown, but the shoe certainly fits. Either way, what happens next draws us deeper into a horror scenario, as our character enters the corridor of this place and disembodied voices begin to call out to him, saying, "Welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely face. Plenty of room at the Hotel California. Any time of year, you can find it here." So then, we've officially been welcomed. Our character has officially entered the Hotel California, a place of surface beauty with a haunting going on inside, a haunting which finds his visage lovely to behold, giving credence to the notion that evil feeds on the innocent, and as these lines point out, there's always room for one more. Her mind is Tiffany twisted, Don Henley explains about the woman who greeted our protagonist at the door. She got the Mercedes-Benz. She got a lot of pretty boys that she calls friends. How they dance in the courtyard. Sweet summer sweat. Some dance to remember. Some dance to forget. These lines seem to be quite self-explanatory. In the storied sense, put simply, these friends of our female greeter are party animals, living it up in the courtyard. Under the surface, however, this is a commentary of the superficiality of the decadent American, well, predominantly 1970s Los Angelean lifestyle. The woman, representing a certain type of women in Los Angeles at the time, having her mind Tiffany twisted spells this assertion out quite clearly, as Tiffany & Company is an upscale jewelry store on Santa Monica Boulevard, the place where starlets have dropped uncountable amounts of money on shiny things since Hollywood took shape, even beforehand. However, to take it in an even more specific direction, this line, or these lines, seem to be a commentary Henley was making about the groupies and gold diggers he and his bandmates began to encounter upon becoming famous. In fact, in one interview he gave in explanation of Hotel California, he stated, "It was really about the excesses of American culture and certain girls we knew," referring to these very hangers-on. The last couple lines, "some dance to remember, some dance to forget," are a clever reference to the substance abuse that fuels the party lifestyle, as in every party scene you'll find those abusing such substances to either create great memories for the future or escape terrible memories from the past. And in the midst of this dissoluteness, our protagonist grows a thirst all his own as we enter into the fourth verse. "So I called up the captain. 'Please bring me my wine.' He said, 'We haven't had that spirit here since 1969. And still those voices are calling from far away. Wake you up in the middle of the night just to hear them say. Once again, I'm sure we all know what they say, but before getting into that, we'll note that while interviewers are quick to point out that wine is technically not a spirit, as it's fermented, not distilled, Don Henley is quick to point out that he's well aware of this, once stating in retort, "You're not the first to bring this to my attention, and you're not the first to completely misinterpret the lyric and miss the metaphor. That line in the song has little or nothing to do with alcoholic beverages. It's a socio-political statement. My only regret would be having to explain it in detail to you, which would defeat the purpose of using literary devices in songwriting and lower the discussion to some silly and irrelevant argument about chemical processes." That fiery response begs the question as to what literary device is being used. The answer is likely that the wine and spirit being mentioned is representative of the spirit of the 1960s, a time of freedom, peace, and harmony, as wine in literature often denotes these very qualities, whereas Hotel California is a look at the era it was written in, the mid-1970s, where the culture of flower power had become a thing of the past, and the selfish, glitzy age that was leading into the disco era was at hand. Some say the spirit of the 60s symbolically died with the horrible events in California that were masterminded by Charles Manson in 1969. And while this line isn't necessarily about Manson, it seems to signify the notion of the disappearance of that epoch all the same, and the beginning of the age of the Antichrist, as wine also represents communion with Christ, the lack of it representing a complete loss of morality and godliness. This makes sense then that the haunting voices our character heard when he entered the hotel wake him up in the middle of the night saying once again, "Welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely face." Only in this chorus, the end lines are changed to, "They're living it up at the Hotel California. What a nice surprise. Bring your alibis," suggesting that all who stay at the hotel are guilty of something or other. Mirrors on the ceiling. The pink champagne on ice. The next verse begins, our narrator describing the self-indulgence of the hotel's culture as his female guide pulls him farther and farther into the madness. And she said, "We are all just prisoners here of our own device," meaning we're trapped here, but we entered of our own volition. That is to say, for example, I craved fame so I came to Hollywood, only to become a lifelong systemic slave to its debaucherous corruption. And in the master's chambers, the lyrics continue, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. These lines are quite interesting, and upon dissection, seemingly quite deep. First, we'll get it out of the way that the use of the word steely is a nod to the band Steely Dan, who mentioned the Eagles in their own song, Everything You Did, singing, "Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening," in reference to songwriter Walter Becker's ex-girlfriend who apparently loved the Eagles. Secondly, we'll recognize that the fifth and final sense has been mentioned now, that of taste, as this entire stanza is dedicated to eating. And with that out of the way, we'll get into the meat of these lines, pun intended, by starting with the two nouns that are mentioned, the master and the beast. Now, while both of these titles have been used to denote heroin and heroin addiction, that is to say, in this scene the theory goes that the hotel guests are gathered together to shoot up, there appears to be a deeper meaning in this stanza. The master and the beast are also both titles used in literature, poetry, and the occult for Satan, or the devil, and have been for centuries. So in that light, we need to look at it this way. We're told here that the residents of the hotel are feasting on the beast in the master's chambers. In other words, the meal being served is Satan. Think about that. They are serving Satan. This underlying theme goes hand in hand with the prior verse that outlined the spirit of holiness, represented by wine, not having been served there since 1969. And of course, this also answers the question presented in the second verse as to whether this place is heaven or hell. In the end, we see the overarching thematic metaphor for the whole song being that Hollywood, or America for that matter, are fallen places, heavenly facades with hellscape inner sanctums. And at this point, our protagonist has completely lost his innocence. Once an aimless traveler spellbound by the bright lights on the hill, now a resident of evil. "The last thing I remember, I was running for the door," he sings as he hits his breaking point and searches for a way to escape. "I had to find the passage back to the place I was before." "Relax," said the night man. "We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." And those are the last haunting words we're left with. A clear message that those who enter the hotel are prisoners to it forever. The message of the song being you can never go back. That is to say, when you learn horrific truths, you can never go back to the blissful ignorance that you once existed in before you knew them. Or to put it yet another way, once your innocence or naivety is stripped from you, it's lost forever. Don Henley and his fellow Eagles, like so many others who reached the heights of attaining the supposed American dream, soon came to realize that, in many ways, they'd sleptwalked into a nightmare. And that's what Hotel California is all about. The underbelly of the fantasy. The truth of the matter being that all that glitters is not gold. But of course, that's just one opinion, and I'll remind you that all lyrics are subjective to the listener. And with that being said, I'd love to know what you think the lyrics to Hotel California are about by writing your opinion down below in the comments section. But before you do, first sit back and enjoy these bonus 5 additional Hotel California facts. 1. Reaching the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in May of 1977, Hotel California also received the Grammy Award for Record of the Year. 2. In late 1997, subscribers of the highly reputable Guitarist magazine voted the back-and-forth guitar leads between Don Felder and Joe Walsh at the end of Hotel California as the best guitar solo of all time. 3. Recorded twice in LA's Record Plant Studios without success, a third version of Hotel California was then recorded in Miami at Criteria Studios to fix what the band saw as problems with the former two. Those fixes being to first slow down the tempo, and then drop the key from E minor to B minor in order to fit Don Henley's vocal range correctly. Meaning, ironically, Hotel California failed to come to fruition until it was recorded outside of California. 4. In 1979, writer Ed Sanders began an authorized biography of the Eagles and was given a book of original lyric sheets in Don Henley's handwriting, including Hotel California. Over 40 years later, some of those sheets, Hotel California included, ended up in the possession of rare book dealer Glenn Horowitz and rock memorabilia specialist Craig Inchiardi and Edward Kaczynski, who were about to auction them off for upwards of $1 million. Henley claimed he never gave Sanders the lyric sheets to keep, and the 3 collectors who had bought them from Sanders were charged for obtaining them illegally. But eventually, in early 2024, the charges were dropped. 5. In 1998, when Eagles were inducted into Cleveland's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all 7 past and present members joined one another on stage and performed an epic version of Hotel California live. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like and a share and leave your comment down below. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. There's many more videos on the way.